Oh my. Okay. Yeah. Yes, 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 yes. Here we are for the good fight. Woo, 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 woo. It's a lot going on tonight. It's a lot going on in the world of technology, but we are here. Mm-mm, mm-mm. Thank you so much for joining us for the Good Fight. We are live every single Tuesday night from 7. We're not live every single Tuesday night, but something happens every single Tuesday night from 7 to 8 o'clock p.m. CST. I am your guide, the Reverend Doctor. You can call me Denise, and I'm so excited to be on this journey with you of us making our way towards a pure and raw faith that is decolonized and seen through the eyes of the oppressor. I don't think I say that enough, but seen through the eyes of the oppressed, not the oppressor. But if this is your first time joining us, you are so welcome in this space. If you join us on a regular or consistent basis, you are so welcome in this space. Whoever you are, wherever you are, welcome, welcome, welcome. This space would not be complete without you. Thank you so much for being here. But if this is your first time, there are ways that you can engage with the good fight. One of them is to see yourself reflected in a mirror. So as we talk about the stories or the text, are you one of the characters in the story? If so, which one? That's for you to decide. Once you decide which character you are playing or have played or want to play, then you can begin to interrogate yourself and asking if that's how you really want to show up in the world as it relates to your faith. The second way that you can engage is to look through a window. So this is not, you can't find yourself in the story. You've never played these roles. They are foreign to you. Maybe you've heard about them somewhere sometime, but it's not your life. And so instead of worrying about that, which is nothing to worry about at all, you just center the other person's story. So you realize that this is about somebody else, but their story is just as important as yours. So we want to make room for that because we don't know what we're going to learn. We don't know how the Spirit is going to use that story. So we are open to receive it. The third way that you can engage is to walk through a door. So hopefully this is not the beginning and end of a conversation, but the conversation will continue. You will continue to think about it, marinate, research something more you'll add to this conversation. And that's what it means to walk through a door. And finally, you can absolutely comment right here. I got a message from Facebook saying that they're not going to record this or something. So I'm hoping to fix that, but I don't think I can fix. I'm going to try to fix it on the flip side. But anyway, while they tripping, we're going to keep on going. I decided last week one of the things I love about doing this live, and I think I shared this with somebody a couple of days ago. One of the things I like about it is that there are moments when I have a realization, an aha moment, or an epiphany, like in real time. Like as I'm talking to you, something just hits me, and I'm like, oh, I didn't even think about that. And so I feel like I'm growing and learning, right beside you. And so it was during last week's conversation that I decided that we were going to continue with last week's discussion because all of what I prepared, we did not even touch on half of it. So I want to see if I can't get through the other half today. I'm going to try not to have like 3 times talking about the same thing, but here we are finishing up last week. So last week, the topic of the conversation was President Jesus. This week, I noticed that it did not have a question mark on the flyer. So I put a question mark on the flyer, President Jesus. So that's what it's supposed to read like this week. And I'm continuing with 1 Samuel chapter 8. So we did 1 Samuel chapter 8 last week, 1 through 9. And then we're going to hopefully get through 10 through 22 on tonight. And then we'll be done with the whole President Jesus topic. But let me just say this. I thought about it when I said, President Jesus, if you ever have an opportunity to read to someone and you consider yourself to be a good reader, or proficient in reading, or one who's been told by somebody else that you are a good reader, I don't ever think it's a good idea for us to label ourselves. Like, I don't think you should label yourself ally. I don't think you should label yourself progressive. I don't think you should label yourself a good reader. I feel like that has to be affirmed in you. Even your call to ministry, whatever ministry you say you have, whether it's at school or at the grocery store, or if it's at the daycare, like wherever you feel like you're called to ministry, I don't think you should say it. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't feel it and know it, but it's when somebody else says it to you that I feel like the affirmation is authentic, because they are confirming what you already know. They're not telling you, because if they were telling you, you'd be surprised. But when they tell you, you're like, oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Because in your mind, you're thinking, I knew that. I felt that. But if somebody has told you that you are a good reader, please, please, please take an opportunity to read to children. And when I say children, I'm talking about from in utero all the way up to, say, 18. Maybe even 21. Some children have never heard the words read aloud to them, and so they don't know what the text is supposed to sound like. They can see the words, many of them can read the words, but to get the text to come to life takes practice, and it's better if they can hear what it sounds like to ask a question, hear what it sounds like to express an emotion, an exclamation point, to know when somebody, to hear what it sounds like when somebody is saying. Like, it's really a different experience when children and youth can hear a text come alive. Like, that's what it is. So I would just encourage you to do that. So last week we were talking about 1 Samuel chapter 8 verses 1 through 9, when the people ask for a king. And the prophet at the time, who is Samuel, is trying to get the people to understand that their ask for a king is very misguided, that it's not something that they should do. He's trying to warn them. He wants to keep them from doing it. He doesn't get into an argument about it. He doesn't go back and forth. He simply prays to his God. And the answer to his prayer from God is to give the people what they want. Samuel does not want to do this, but he also is not one to disobey God. So when God says, okay, give them what they want a king, give them a king, God also tells Samuel to warn them. Make sure that you grant their request with a warning that you are this is not what the text says. This is me paraphrasing. You're going to be sorry that you did this. We're giving you what you want, but you really don't want it. You have no idea what you are about to do. You're about to wreck your life. But since this is what you want, go ahead and do it. And so this came from a conversation I was having with my Black conservative Republican brother. And I'm not sure that matters. I think it matters because the only reason I think it matters is because what we like to do is have genuine, authentic conversation from across the aisles, so to speak. So we have different perspectives about a lot of stuff. We have different perspectives about theology. We have different perspectives about politics. We have different perspectives about family. We have different perspectives about children. So we come from these different world views, even though we were brought up in the same house. And so we are fascinated by how our minds work, coming from the same parents and having the same lived experience inside the home. Now, once we left the home, we were doing our own thing. And so that's why I gave you his identities. It doesn't mean I'm not judging him any more than he's judging me, but that's who I'm having the conversation with. And my brother was saying that even though, so that's what was happening in the Bible, but he really feels like this is that moment for us as the people that we find in 1 Samuel chapter 8. We have done the same thing with this last presidential election, that we have spoken as a majority of people in the electoral college and said, this is the president that we want. Hear me when I say the majority of people that were counted in the electoral college, the states that voted this way, that's the majority I'm talking about, but it affects us all. We all got swooped up into it. that perhaps God said, oh, okay, this is what you want. This is what you're going to get, but you about to wreck your life. I'm going to give it to you though. But just know, you've been warned. And so that's where we ended last week, just going through verses 1 through 9 and getting to the point that we realized that the people's wish has been granted, the king has been delivered, and now for the rest of the text, God says, this is what's going to happen, right? This is the warning I told you about. I can outline it. So I really appreciate God, because God in this moment feels to me like a really good friend. I don't take the word friend lightly at all. I am not someone who calls everybody my friend. Facebook calls people our friends, but just because we are friends on Facebook, that has nothing to do with my life. I don't count you friend in my life just because you show up as a friend on Facebook. I believe that friendship is something that is born over time, and that it requires a going through of something. Not necessarily something that severs our relationship for a short time or damages or injures our relationship, but some kind of hurdle that we've had to cross together, whether it's we're grieving the loss of someone that we shared or we cared about, or one of us cared about, or whether or not we lose. I said grieving a loss, because and I'm not just talking about like to death, to physical death. It could be an emotional death, could be a romantic death, like some kind of loss that we've had to weather together. Or it could be that we got into it about something and it caused us to have to step away so that we could find our way back to each other. Or maybe it's we went on a road trip and we almost died in a car crash. Just whatever it is that we have to go through. There's something about going through the fire with a person that I think binds us together. I know that there are relationships where people say, oh, no, we never have an argument, but I can't imagine that because I think arguing is absolutely healthy. I mean, the researchers say it too. So I'm not judging anybody for not having an argument. But for me, I feel like arguments are part of the normal course of relationships. And so I feel like God is that very good friend. A good friend is one that I think will tell you the truth and not be concerned at all about your feelings. I cannot, as a good friend to you, be so concerned about your feelings that I overlook the truth, when that overlooking of the truth is really what's going to cause you harm. Your feelings may be hurt, and that's true, but that's because you're operating in your emotions at that moment. But when you're able to rise above your emotions, we're still left with the issue. And so we have to deal with the issue no matter what. And I feel like that's what a good friend does. A good friend says, yes, I will make sure that I'm holding space for your emotions when they come back. When you say, because I ain't like the way you made me feel, I'm going to be right here for that conversation. But in the meantime, I got to tell you what I know is true about whatever it is that we're going through. And so God says, I'm telling you now that this is not something that I got to tell you, you about to wreck your life. I've got to tell you the truth. And I'm going to tell you what it looks like. And God is also that friend that says, and when you find your way back to me, when we find our way to each other, because I'm making an effort, just like you're making an effort to get back together, to be reconciled one to another, I'm not going to judge you. I'm not going to say I told you so. I'm going to hold the same space for you. I'm not going to be any different than I was before. And so God goes through this whole piece where God says, hey, I'm going to give you what you want. It's not going to be good. This is what is going to happen. And so here's where we're going to pick up the story today, talking about, and I still didn't bring my phone. That's because I had to put it on the charger. So now we're going to go through verses 10 through 22, 10 through 21, and then 22 is just kind of like a epilogue kind of thing, to talk about what God says. Now, I am not one of those people who believes that you should separate religion and politics. I don't believe that for 1 second. I think that we should be able to talk about anything as grown folks. I'm saying as grown folks, but like, who gets to decide what grown is? Because even children should be able to have conversations with each other. So I feel like effective communication is the key to having conversations across any topic. And I almost feel like yes, I want to say this. I almost feel like it is by a trick of the enemy to get us to believe that we are to separate religion and politics. That we don't want to talk about these and not just separate them, but to have those two topics be something that you shouldn't talk about with each other, because people say, oh no, I guess because people are going to get upset, people are going to be enraged, people are going to stop talking to each other, going to fall out. And I say that's the very reason why we should be talking about it, because lots of times the misunderstanding that happens through a lack of communication is so harmful. It's way more harmful than the injury we may endure by trying to talk through something that's complicated and difficult. So if you are one of those people who doesn't believe that your faith has anything to do with politics, you don't want to talk about politics, you don't believe it's godly, then you should like get off now. Just get off. It's okay. I am not going to be upset. I'm not going to be judgmental, like, because I'm about to talk about politics as it relates to our faith. So here's what my plan is. This is the way that I want to do this. I want to outline the things that God says is going to happen by reading the text. And then I want to take each one of those things that I kind of enumerated. I think I came up with like 6 or 7 things that I feel like God says is going to happen to us. And I want to apply it to our lives now and try to show some relevance, to say, this is what is recorded in the Bible, and here's what is actually happening to us today. I'm not trying to say that God was talking to us through the prophet back then, because I am not saying that at all. I'm asking us, can we see a reflection of the words that we find in the Bible in what we're living today? I'm not trying to say that anybody was prophetic. I'm not trying to prove that means that God's word is correct. I'm not trying to do any of that, because sometimes when people say things are prophetic, meaning somebody can foresee what's going to happen and they tell you what's going to happen before it happens. Sometimes when we say things are prophetic, I don't believe that they really are. I believe that even Ray Charles could look back on it and say, could be in this moment and say, yeah, of course we're in this moment right now because we did this, and this. And all of these things led up to this moment. It don't take no prophet to tell us. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to tell us. All we have to do is pay attention to our past. And our past has led us to this point. So I'm in no way trying to say anything about the veracity, the verity of the Bible. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just asking the question. No, I'm not even asking the question. I'm saying, hey, this is what I found in the Bible. This is what is happening right now. What do you think about it? Will you consider it in your conversation to yourself or to others or what have you? So that's what I want to do. And that's what we're going to do right now. I keep going. Let me see. I actually had to take I always take serious notes in preparation for tonight, these nights, Tuesday nights, but I don't always have to refer to the notes because I usually can remember things and recall them very well. But it's so much, it's so much to talk about tonight that I actually am going to have to depend on my notes along with the text. The text I should be able to pull up right here. I did not create a visual for the note-taking piece because sometimes I feel like I'm still a teacher, like we in school. I don't want you to feel like you're in school. But I am going to talk about these things. And so I'm just trying to get to, I shouldn't have done this. Do you all have journals and sometimes you have some empty space somewhere and then you want to fill in the empty space? But then you have too much to write, so you got to go to the next page, but you don't have a next page. You got to go all the way over and over to find the next page, and that's what I did, and I shouldn't have done that. But, okay, here we go. So I think that the text is already here, so we're going to start with 1 Samuel chapter 8, beginning at verse 10, and this says verses 10 through 13. So this is 1 Samuel chapter 8, verses 10 through 13. I'm going to read this text. I'm going to pause for Selah, meaning let's just pause and calmly think about what has been said. And I'll leave the words up for the Selah so you can go back and refer to them. And then I will launch into what that looks like for us today and just to have conversation around it. Okay? So here we go, 1 Samuel chapter 8, verses 10 through 13. Samuel told all the words of the Lord to the people who were asking him for a king. He said, "This is what the king who will reign over you will claim as his rights. He will take your sons and make them serve with his chariots and horses, and they will run in front of his chariots. Some he will assign to be commanders of thousands and commanders of fifties, and others to plow his ground and reap his harvest, and still others to make weapons of war and equipment for his chariots." Again, according to the New International Version, Samuel told all the words of the Lord to the people who were asking him for a king. He said, "This is what the king who will reign over you will claim as his rights. He will take your sons and make them serve with his chariots and horses, and they will run in front of his chariots. Some he will assign to be commanders of thousands and commanders of fifties, and others to plow his ground and reap his harvest, and still others to make weapons of war and equipment for his chariots." Have I been talking on mute all this time? Have I been on mute all this time, y'all? I certainly hope I haven't been on mute all this time. Oh my goodness. So that was 1 Samuel chapter 8, verses 10 through 13. Just in case I was on mute, I apologize. Like I said, this has been a crazy day with technology, and I got something in my mouth. But if you use a different version, a different translation, which I think I was using the easy Bible verse, what it basically says is that the king will take, the first part, the king will take your sons to be his soldiers. Now, based on the patriarchy that happens and that is very clear and present in the Bible, we usually find the positive affirmations about gender being assigned to men. And so the word sons in this case would usually, for the Bible, for all intents and purposes in the Bible, it's going to be men. But we know that in our day and time, it's not just men who are able to serve in the military. Women are also able to serve in the military. People of trans experience had been able to serve in the military. So this word sons now has to be expanded to include anyone who enlists and is able to pass whatever tests and drills you have to pass so that you can be a member and be a service person to us in that way. And so what this first part says is that the king that you asked for, God is now saying, this is what this king is going to do. And he's saying it through the word, through the mouth of Samuel, according to the Bible. It's going to take people to be his soldiers, the king's soldiers. And so that means then we're talking about the military. So if we think about this presidential administration that we have right now, one of the things that President Trump said that he was going to do, or the platform on which he ran his campaign, was that he was going to be an anti-war president. That is one of the things that he wanted to be known for throughout his tenure as this second opportunity in the White House to serve as president. He's going to be anti-war. And this does not just happen with President Trump. So this is not about anybody bashing. It's not about me, because I'm the one talking. It's not about me bashing him. It's not about me judging him. It's not about me expressing any kind of feelings about his presidential campaign or one way or the other. It's simply about stating the facts. And these are facts because we can go back and pull and roll the tape. So he campaigned on a platform that said he would be anti-war. He even said that he was going to end the war. Which war was that he said he was going to end within 24 hours of taking office? He was like, no, I'm going to stop this. The war between Russia and Ukraine. He even said that 24 hours after I step into office, I am going to end this war. He has not done that. So when we think about these words that's in the Bible, that the king is going to take to use the military for his soldiers, that these soldiers are his, he's going to deploy them to do what he wants them to do, which is what all commanders in chief, presidents have the right to do. This is what has happened. So we have the war that continues between Israel and Gaza. And even though we can roll the tape and see that this is genocide, like we're watching genocide unfold. What is genocide? It is the murder and the slaughtering of a group of people, of a peoples. So this is, we can see this genocide from men and women and children, from civilians to other military people, like all manner of people are being killed in this war effort that's happening between Israel and Gaza, and that is continuing under President Trump's watch. I didn't say that it started with his administration. I said it continues. But so for someone to say that I'm going to, that I'm running on a platform that is anti-war, then we would have been expecting him to take steps to eliminate this practice of war that we have so readily taken up as the United States. That's not what has happened. And again, President Trump is not the only president who has run on a platform that says one thing and then gotten into office and then operated in a different way. Like, he's not the only president that has done it. As a matter of fact, there are some of us who are so disappointed with the political sphere, with the political machine, because we feel like that's what people do. That's what politicians do all the time. They lie to us. They lie to us just to get our vote so they can get in office and do whatever it is their particular constituency wants them to do, or the lobbyists, they cater to the lobbyists. That's what we believe is happening. So this is not the first time, but this is where we are right now. And again, the war between Russia and Ukraine that Trump said that he was going to end within 24 hours of his presidency, his second presidency, he did not do that. And then there's also this escalating, like the military is now doing even more than it was doing before. So for an anti-war president to now be expanding the presence of the military just in fantastical ways, like mind-boggling ways, that's what is happening. So the military now is operating in the Middle East and in East Africa. So Somalia was the very first country in East Africa that was bombed. And the latest bombing in Somalia was in May. And Somalia has not done anything to us. Like, this is us not even being prompted by, or even we're not being responsive to Somalia with this bombing. It is something that we have decided to do, and we have bombed them repeatedly since Trump has been in office. Also in Yemen, we were fighting against Yemen, and it was going back and forth until the U.S. called it off, but we only called it off because we could see that we were failing. There's something sinister about our country in that we cannot say that we lost. We do not lose well at all. We do not know how to be gracious with losing. We have to try to spin the narrative, create the narrative, to use the power of the pen to always make us come out on top, because we cannot fathom anybody believing that we are not on top. where, of course, there are plenty of us who know we're not on top, that we are not the absolute best country. But as a country, we continue to push forward this story about us always being the best. And so, the reason we stopped fighting in Yemen is because we were losing, and we didn't want it to go down as L, even though that's what we know happened. So we pulled out. And we continue to support the Israelis in the genocide of the people of Gaza. And there was this 12-day, we helped Israel in this 12-day bombardment against Gaza. We joined in on it. So we could have just, if we're going to be anti-war, we could have said, hey, that's what's going on with them. We don't have anything to do with it. We're not going to get involved. We could have come out and spoken against it and declared that it was inhumane. But instead, we joined the fight with Israel. We also we've also now taken this framework of the war on terror, and we've applied it to other people. And so we've said, okay, we're going to use this language of the war on terror to give us permission as a military to use military force to attack these people that we believe are falling under this framework that we have created since 2001. And so we feel like we can, like in Mexico, in Central America, and in the Caribbean since 2001, we say we have a right to attack these people because we have declared them to be terrorist organizations. And that's things that we are doing where we consider it to be abroad. Like these are like an international thing. Like this is beyond the shores of the United States where we have done this. And then we even have taken up this cause with Guantanamo Bay, where we are using, again, this label of terrorists. We're labeling these groups terrorists, and we are using Guantanamo Bay as a place that's a place that's already known for torture. We're using this place and expanding the presence of the military in this space so that we can continue to fight against terrorists, even though since the inception of my understanding is the United States has held this land in Cuba. Guantanamo Bay is in Cuba. The United States has held this land for 100 years. And in the history of Guantanamo Bay, there has not been one single instance where we can show proof that the people that are there are terrorists, but yet we have called them terrorists so that we can justify how the military is being used in Cuba. And Cuba has been saying for quite some time, give us our land back, like asking for it, demanding it. And we have not responded favorably to that request, but we continue to use the land to torture, to harm people that we talking about the United States, have labeled as terrorists. But it's not just on foreign soil that we are that this king, this president, I'm using president as synonymous with king. I am not at all suggesting that President Trump is a king. I'm using the language in the Bible and substituting to show how it's relevant to us. So king in the Bible, I'm likening it to president in our time and day and time. And I feel so comfortable doing that because to be president of the United States, that's the highest office in the land. So to be king of a country, of a province in the Bible, that's the highest office in the land. So that's why I feel like they are synonymous in their offices. I am not at all suggesting that we should bow down and call Trump a king, but because of the office of president being the highest office, the office of king being the highest office, that's why I'm using the words interchangeably. But even on our soil, even as a domestic enterprise, this presidential administration that's led by Trump has increased the budget for ICE. ICE being, what does ICE stand for? Immigration and Customs. immigration and customs enforcement. We've expanded the budget for ICE to be from $9.7 billion, which is the budget that ICE had last year, to now being a budget of $37.5 billion. So that is a huge increase that is funding the efforts of the military on our soil. So this is us as United States citizens fighting against others in our country. So fighting against other people on domestic land. So this is like, so for those of us who disagree with this, we would call it domestic terrorism. So we're terrorizing, we're torturing, we are injuring, we are harming our very own people because they are ones who live among us in the States. And so here we have, and so this is all that is happening with our military right here and right now. Let me get this comment. Hey, Takia. Hey, Takia. So we're talking about 1 Samuel chapter 8, verses 10 through 22, when God begins to outline what's going to happen with this king that the people wanted. God said, you don't want a king. I'm your king. You should not be asking for a king, but the people were adamant about wanting a king. So God said, okay, you can have a king, but I'm going to warn you that this is what's going to happen. And so the first thing that the Bible says, especially in the easy English, the easy version of the Bible, it says that the king is going to take your sons to be his soldiers. And so I'm talking about how the military is now being used right here in our present day time, how it's being used to attack people on foreign soil. It's being used to attack people on American soil. And not only with ICE agents, but also with the deployment of the National Guard and the Marines that happened in California, in Los Angeles. Now, then it happened in DC. And Trump has been threatening to deploy the National Guard to places like Chicago, as well, other places too, because he says that he's cracking down on crime. Now, the statistics, even in Chicago, because Chicago is kind of notorious for its like skyrocketing crime rate, but even Chicago has been documenting declining rates in crime, but still Trump has said, no, we're doing this so that we can, because we're fighting this war on crime, that we're tackling crime. But it's interesting, he's only doing this in the Democratic states, and to suggest that those are the only states that have crime, then that is just an illusion. And so what's really happening is that this presidential administration, even from the first term and now through the second term, has done a lot to say, listen, we are strong, we are powerful, we gonna do what we want, and you just take it, kind of thing. Like, so he's flexing his authority, like flexing his muscles. And so the whole point of this conversation is, this dialogue tonight is to say, okay, this is what we see in the Bible. Is there any relevance to us today? Can we see the same thing happening where God says, hey, you're asking for something that I know is not good for you, but because you are asking, you think you want it, I'm going to give it to you, but it's going to come with consequences. And here are the consequences. And that first consequence is that your children are going to be soldiers in this war. And one of the things, my dad was in the Army, my brother was in the Marines, and so I do have veterans in my family. And one of the things that my brother talks about, when you ask him about his tenure, you ask him what it felt like to be a soldier, like how did it feel to be fighting against these people, and then when you see children and women being killed, and sometimes you're the one that's killing them, like what is that like? And my brother has said to me more than once that that's not a question that he asked. Now, I'm only talking for my brother. I am not trying to speak for any other member of the military. I'm only talking for my brother. My brother says, once you enlist into the military, you understand that the hierarchy is what you respect. And if the commander in chief issues an order, it is your duty to respond. It is not your duty to ask yourself, how do you feel about it? It's not your duty to ask yourself, do you like it? It's not your duty to ask yourself, would you do it if you were president? It is your duty to respond and to carry out the orders that you have been given. And that's what they do. And that's what my brother would say to me. So this is what the Bible says. So your sons are going to become the king's soldiers. So the people, because we have more than just men in our military, the people are now subject to the order, the will of the president. And when he says be deployed to DC, that's what they do. And so we can't blame the military servicemen and women and bodies for obeying a command, because that's the way it works. It's almost like when you are a little bitty child and your mama tell you to do something, you don't get to say, well, you can if you want to, but not in my house. You do what you're told, because this is the hierarchy and this is how it works. The other thing that it says is that some of your sons will have to plow the king's fields. This is what the Bible says in 1 Samuel chapter 8. Remember, not only does God issue the warning, he enumerates it. These are the things. Like, I want you to be clear about what's about to happen to you. You asked for the king. I gave you the king. Now watch these things. And so it says that some of your sons will plow the king's field. So we just got through talking about the expansion of funds for ICE. ICE is going around rounding up immigrants in our country. We generally think of as brown. I'm not saying that that's all, but we generally think of them as being brown. I'm painting with a very large brush here. And so they are being deported. So you're literally taking them out of the fields, because most of them, that's their work. They travel the country season to season, going where the work is, out in the fields, picking the strawberries, the bananas, and whatever those other produce, whatever that other produce is. That's what they do. And so now if you deport them, that leaves the fields unattended. So we could ask the question, well, if you deport them and the fields are unattended, who's going to be in those fields? And so one could argue, and this is my argument, that he's going to drive somebody else to those fields. And just based on the history of our country, with our caste system and with the divide between race relations, many of us are like, oh, you're trying to get black people back in the fields, because we have a history of being in the fields. The brown people were doing it, but now they're gone. So who else you think gonna do it? And so some of us are thinking, oh, so you think I'm about to go into the field? And that is one of the things that that God says through Samuel in the text. This is what's gonna happen to y'all. Some of y'all gonna end up plowing these fields. It also goes on to say, in what we read in verses 10 through 13, that the king, or the president in our case, is going to have the people make weapons so they can fight war. They'll have people making weapons to fight war. I tried to look up, because I'm from Mississippi, I wanted to know if Mississippi is one of those states that manufactures ammunition and firearms, and it is not. But Arkansas is, where I'm living right now. Arkansas has an ammunition plant, and we have a ammunition facility and a firearm facility. And we have been pumping more money into the firearm facility that we already have. And then we have this new facility that we put $63 million into. The ammunition place, we have $150 million that we've pumped into making ammunition. And then we say, well, that should be a good thing, because it has created 625 jobs and people need jobs. And so, yes, this is a good thing. So our Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders, is saying that we want to expand our presence in this industry, this ammunition, this firearm industry. We want to be very relevant and timely to this industry. And so this is why we're doing these things. So in Arkansas, we can absolutely see this connection between what it says in the text, that the king is going to make the soldiers, or make the people make weapons. That's exactly what we're doing here. That's what we do in Texas. That's what we do in Florida. That's what we do in Arizona. those are the states where you can usually find these kinds of facilities that are making these weapons. Already happening before Trump got into office, but now it's expanding under his leadership. And so for this president to say he's anti-war, and we're not only do we see the presence of our country in war, more war, continuing war, but also making sure that we have enough ammunition and we have enough firearms to carry out the war. And then in the case of Israel, we want to make sure that we're helping other people in their war. And in this case with Israel, it is we're helping them commit genocide. So those verses 10 through 13, where it says that your children are going to become his soldiers. They're going to, some of your children are going to end up plowing in his fields, and some of your children are going to end up making weapons of war. We can see a connection here between what the Bible says and what is happening to us even now. Again, I am not saying that the Bible is prophetic. I'm not saying that, oh my goodness, look at this supernatural thing that's happening to us. I'm not suggesting that. I'm saying if we think about the route that we have been taking as a country, the journey we've been on since our inception, if you want to believe Nicole Hannah-Jones and say that it started in 1619, when you just look at how we've been moving, then it should not be a surprise to us. So when somebody comes to you and says something like, listen, this is what the Lord told me to tell you, if it's a surprise to you what they say, then I would say that that's not of the Lord, because it shouldn't be a surprise. When people come to you with a word from the Lord, it should confirm what you are already feeling. It should affirm what you were already experiencing in your body and in your life. And so it just adds that layer of, oh, thank you, because I knew something was happening, and I'm so glad that you named it, because I was feeling it the whole time. And if that's not what happens, then I would say get a second opinion. I would say be wary of that word. And so that's what I feel like the Bible is doing for us, not surprising us, but saying, no, you're not crazy. No, you're not. This is not, you're not being gaslit. This is actually happening because we're following the trajectory. And so now let's go to 1 Samuel chapter 8, starting picking up verse 13, going from verse 13 to verse 18. I'm going to read and keep talking because we're running out of time. Okay, so here it says, this is verse 13. He will take your daughters to be perfumers. I need my glasses. Let me start over. He will take your daughters to be perfumers and cooks and bakers. He will take the best of your fields and vineyards and olive groves and give them to his attendants. He will take a tenth of your grain and of your vintage and give it to his officials and attendants. Your male and female servants and the best of your cattle and donkeys he will take for his own use. He will take a tenth of your flocks, and you yourselves will become his slaves. When that day comes, you will cry out for relief from the king you have chosen, but the Lord will not answer you in that day. So Takia says, she's been commenting. Let me get these comments. I love when we think we want something until we really F around and find out. Literally has been happening since the beginning of time. Absolutely. And then what is so amazing is that somebody will say to us, I don't think that's a good idea. That's not what you want to do. This ain't going to end well. And we will double down. Oh, you don't tell me. We will double down. And so, yes, we think we want the king. We demand the king. And God says, okay, give him a king. So Takia also says, my granddad is a Marine. I'm going to tell my brother that. I'm going to tell my brother that your granddaddy feels the same way. Yeah. Well, can you ask your granddaddy too, like, if your granddaddy is still alive? Looking back, like reflecting now that he's no longer in the service, does he have any feelings about it? Because I know he didn't have any feelings. Like, that's not his job to entertain his feelings, engage his feelings while he was in the military, but how does he feel about it now? And I'm going to ask my brother the same thing. And then right here, speaking of the parallels you're mentioning, it reminds me of Stacey Abrams' conversation about the 10 steps to autocracy. Like you said, it's not prophetic, but if you follow the history, it is not surprising. And that's what I want to make sure that I'm drilling into us right now, that sometimes we want to make stuff be so supernatural. We want to make stuff be so otherworldly so that we can justify why it is that we believe in God. And I'm not saying that you should not do that, but in this case, that's not what this is. This is not something happening to us so that it can bring us closer to God, because now we, oh my goodness, look at what the Lord, look at how God is showing us these things. No. We can see, we are responsible for this, and we can see it for ourselves. So absolutely, with these parallels. Okay, and so Takia says she's going to ask, yes, I do want to know what your granddaddy has to say now about all that he participated in and witnessed. And I am going to ask my brother too. And so when it says that the king will take your best fields, your vines, and your olive trees away from you, it made me think of heirs property. Have you all heard of heirs property? Heirs. Heirs, not AIRS. HEIRS. So these are people who have inherited land. You've inherited land, but you inherited it informally, meaning there is no will. This was land that was in your family. It's been passed down, and there's no formal document that you can pull that says this is our land, but you know that this is land in your family. And so it's heirs property. And so what happens is that everybody who's an heir of the person who left the land gets to claim the land as their own. So take my family, for example. There are 3 of us. So if my parents had land and they left it, and there was no will to say who it belonged to, it would belong to us because we are their heirs. It would belong to all 3 of us. So it'll be up to all 3 of us to claim this land. But what we would need for the government is a formal document that states that this land is ours. If we do not have that formal document, then the government can take that land. They can just say, well, you can't prove it's yours, so now it's ours. And we know that in this country, if you want to acquire wealth, if you are interested in leaving an economic legacy for your heirs, then land ownership is number 1 on that list. So when it says the king will take this land from you, we have a practice in our country where not only will you not be able to keep your land, but there are consequences for not having the documents, because I could say, I have 2 brothers. It's Derek, Dwayne, and Denise. So I could say, hey, I want to sell the land, and I could actually sell it right from under my brothers, because since there's no formal document, all of us have the same rights to the land. So we can sell it, and there's a whole big child. Y'all know what I don't know. I don't want to say y'all know. Some of us know what happens when a parent or an elder in the family dies. All kinds of chaos erupts around property, around money, around relationships. It's just a show. And so one of the ways that we can be harmed by this, by the king taking the best fields and the best vines, I'm likening that to the heirs property. You could use something else, but I'm also likening it to the heirs property to raise our level of consciousness around it, because it particularly affects Black folks, because we are culturally, painting with a broad brush, culturally, we don't want to talk about death. And so we don't get wheels together, because we don't want to think about, I don't want to think about Madea dying. I don't want to think about losing my mama. So when even if they try to have I don't want to talk about that, don't talk about that, you're going to be here forever. You ain't going nowhere. And it's just an unrealistic thing to think. We need to be more mindful of wills and estates and all of those things, because if not, we are disproportionately, as Black folks and brown folks, affected by losing the land that's in our families, because we don't have the conversations that we need to have. It also goes on to say that the king will take 1/10 part of your seeds and your grapes. What are we talking about in this language? The tenth of your seed and your grapes for us would be the tithe. Remember, we have first, it's not first, it's Malachi chapter 3, verse 10. Anybody who has been in a church that believes in the prosperity gospel, a church that's a word church that's always quoting the Bible in the sermons and asking you to turn in your journal and take notes, that's why we call it a word church, because you are listening to the word, you're taking notes. It's almost like you're in school. Anybody who has been under that kind of tutelage with ministries where you talk about the tithe, Malachi 3:10 rings familiar. Bring all the tithes into the storehouse, that there may be meat in my house, and prove me now herewith. I will open up the windows of heaven and pour you out a blessing that you will not have room to receive. And I will rebuke the devourer for your sake. And so the king will take that tenth and use it for himself. And when we think about our country, even if we're not talking about the president, when we think about pastors, especially prosperity pastors, we can see how they have taken the very best of our tenth, our tithes, and have used it for themselves. You can just Google, you can just YouTube all kinds of documentaries about how the person that's the highest person in the church and the highest person in the land abuses our taxes, in this case, for their own good. Here's what Takia says. I know this all too well with my paternal grandmother passing. It was pure chaos, and I knew it would be, to the point where I was almost willing to skip the funeral to protect my peace. My daddy's mama, you said your paternal grandmother. My daddy's mama, she died last, and so they left, like, it was 12 children. They left like 12 plots, so it's small plots, and it was so bad for my family that my daddy and one of my aunts just said, you know what, we're not in it. Y'all can have, do whatever y'all want to do. Y'all can have it, because I'm not doing it. So we have to, particularly as Black and brown folks, have more conversations around death. Is a regular part of life. It is a normal part of the life cycle. It's nothing to be afraid of. It's something to be sad about, but it's nothing to be afraid of, because when I think about my mama sitting right here, that she's still forever with me. Her energy has shifted. She's now in a different state. Absolutely. She's no longer physically with me, but she ain't going nowhere. So we have to have these conversations, because we got to protect our peace. And it should not be that hard in a time when we need our families to come together the most, because all of us are hurting. All of us are sad. All of us are grieving. All of us are mourning. We just got to do a better job. And then the other, number 7, I've lifted up 7 things out of this text. The last one I'll lift up is that, I lifted up 6 things that are going to happen, that God says is going to happen, that we see happening, unfolding right before our eyes. And then the last thing it says is that when all of this happens, you're going to complain. You're going to come right back to me, the one you begged for a king. You begged me for a king. I gave you a king. I said, this is what's going to happen. And all of these things I listed for you, and all of these things happen. Now you want to complain. Come back to me and complain. And according to the Bible says, and God didn't answer. God was like, hey, I'm not studying you right now. I'm not a bit more thinking about you than the man in the moon. Nope. Don't come to me with that mess. And so going back to the full circle with the conversation that my brother and I had, like, do you believe that this is God's will, saying that this presidential administration, the majority of the people through the electoral college, this is what y'all asked for. This is what y'all got. You can complain if you want to, but ain't nothing about to happen for the next 3 years at least. Ain't nothing. God is like, I ain't in it. So what are we going to do as people of faith confronting this? Yes, we need to name that perhaps we made a mistake. Some people don't think we did. Many people do. So if we made a mistake, if we were wrong, if we went against God's best wishes for our lives, What do we do in the meantime now that God has gone silent on us? And God really hasn't gone silent in this case. It's just the election cycle. We got to wait for the election cycle to come around. So God is not going to intervene with that like something miraculous could happen. But just thinking about it in a more practical way, ain't nothing finna change. We got to deal with all these consequences. How are we going to show up for the world at such a time as this, in the midst of all of what is happening politically in front of us, all of what's unfolding? How do we show up for each other in the spirit of Sawubona, that oneness that binds us together? That's what we got to figure out. And that's what I want y'all to keep thinking about as we leave this space tonight. Thank you so much for joining us here at The Good Fight. We'll be right back next Tuesday. Can't wait to see you then. Takia, don't forget to ask your granddaddy. Bye.